Hey guys, we're here today to talk a little bit about what I believe to be the problems with modern gaming and what I believe to have caused games to seemingly lose quality over the last, say, 10 or 20 years, and why they just don't seem to compare to the games of old. This is clearly an opinion piece. Hopefully you guys will hop into the comments and let me know what you think the problems are currently with modern gaming as opposed to games from 10 to 20 years ago, and how you think we might be able to improve it moving on in the future. I'm going to go over just 5 of the topics I think are problems, and that is not to say that these are the only problems with games these days. And I am undoubtedly going to talk a lot about MMORPGs because this is my favorite genre. I believe it is the pinnacle of gaming, and I also believe they have fallen off harder than most other game genres, and they probably have the least representation in modern gaming and have been in a decline for a while. The first problem I believe exists in gaming that has had games drop off in quality is their pricing models. This is a huge topic of controversy in the gaming community, and it's fairly prevalent when you look at MMORPGs, subscription-based, free-to-play, or buy-to-play. Games like Elder Scrolls Online go with the buy-to-play model. You purchase the box cost or the digital download, and then you own the game from there on out. They have incentives to subscribe to their ESO Plus, but you own the game that you bought without having to pay anything further. Guild Wars 2 goes to the free-to-play option. You can download the game, jump in it, check it out. If you want to buy expansions, those cost extra, but you do get the base game for no cost and no subscription afterwards. Whereas Final Fantasy XIV requires you to not only buy the base game, it then requires you to buy any expansions you want, and to continue playing the game, you need to subscribe. So obviously we have subscription-based models currently in the genre and in gaming in general. But Final Fantasy XIV is kind of looked at from a lot of people's perspective as a pariah or an outlier, where it's ridiculous to think about paying a subscription for a game when you have free-to-play options out there or buy-to-play options. I'm guilty of this myself. I avoided playing Final Fantasy XIV for years, while one of my best friends and guildmates played Final Fantasy XIV for a long time trying to convince me to come join. It wasn't until they moved their free trial up to level 60 that I finally decided to try it out and fell in love with the game and have paid a subscription since then. But this got me thinking about subscriptions in general. I used to pay one to play other games back in the day, like EverQuest 2, Dayak, even a little bit of EverQuest 1, although I was there at the late end of that. The problem that we have there is that the subscription model has been slowly phased out of gaming, and now it's seen as something taboo for a developer to do, and therein lies the problem. Ultima Online released in, I believe, 1997, EverQuest 1 launched in 1999. Both of them had a $10 subscription model, and if you look at that compared to our prices now, it's roughly the same price for the subscription. Ultima Online, even according to some articles, released with a $65 box cost, which is roughly equal to $100 this day and age. We paid more for gaming back then than we do right now, and we got arguably better content for the time period than we do right now. This should seem obvious to everyone watching, I'm hoping, and if I'm wrong, maybe you can correct me in some way. We pay developers a box cost or digital download with buy-to-play MMORPGs, or we buy a game like Outriders, all up front, and then the developer has no incentive to continue to put out content on a consistent basis like a subscription model brings. When Ultima Online or EverQuest launched back in the late 90s, buying the box cost or the digital download paid them for the development fees to build the game and all the work they had done prior. But paying the subscription on a monthly basis gave them the income and the motivation to build good content on a steady basis, to fix bugs and patches, because if they did not churn out good content or fix the problems in the game, people would let the subscriptions wear out and would no longer pay them money. When you have a game like Guild Wars 2, where nobody's paying a subscription, you see what they go through by laying off employees at the company. They're putting out a dreadful amount of patches with living worlds. They're not making deadlines. They still haven't gotten a third expansion. The game that does the best right now is Final Fantasy XIV, the only one of them employing the old school subscription model. They still have a cash shop, and that's a completely different topic with its own controversies. But their cash shop is cosmetics, and it doesn't have a big impact on the game. But as far as content goes, Elder Scrolls Online and Final Fantasy XIV employ some ways of a subscription model, and they churn out the highest quality and the most consistent content of anyone in the MMORPG genre. Problem number 2 could be described in probably a few ways. but I'm going to describe it as the journey versus the destination. Every game we play nowadays, it's all about what is in the end game. I can't tell you how many characters in Guild Wars 2 I have used Tomes of Knowledges to level all the way to max. Elder Scrolls Online has their dolmen runs to just power level your character up to the high levels, and Final Fantasy XIV even sells skips, although any player who actually cares for the game will tell you, play the story and it's worth it. Outriders launched recently, and the game was enjoyable for me and was actually really fun and well done all the way up until I got to the end game. I cared more about the journey in Outriders than I did the destination because they had a terrible destination with expeditions. But all we as players care about in the modern day and age is what does the end game look like. Back in the day, or the golden age of gaming, you didn't log in the game to get to a certain point, to get to end game and start raiding. You actually enjoyed the journey to get there and spent more time in it. And that's because games were harder in general. EverQuest 1 had you losing experience when you died. You could even lose levels when you died. It kept you in the grind longer playing the game itself. On top of the fact that they had things like corpse runs and losing all your gear and having to go through the work to be smart about your choices and spend more time instead of speed running to the end, actually enjoying the world around you. Now, this system doesn't work of just creating grind and creating annoyances throughout the game, because that would not be an enjoyable game. The reason it worked for games like EverQuest and Ultima Online to grind through these early levels was because they actually had a quality game world. The problem we have nowadays is developers look at the fact that everyone wants to get to endgame and the fact that they can sell experience scrolls on their crown store. They can sell skips in their gem store, and they can give you methods to skip the content, clearly indicating to you that the content isn't enjoyable. If we as a player base quit skipping the content and jumping to the end, developers will slowly learn that we care about the game itself, and they can put more work into making it an enjoyable experience, even if it's longer. It actually is better if it's longer. If it takes more work to get a level in a game, that level means more to you. People would spend days working on one level in those older games, so when you achieve the level, people would congratulate you in chat. It would be a big deal and a monumental achievement. Nowadays, when you play a game like Elder Scrolls Online and you're doing your little cycle of dolmens, levels are a dime a dozen. Or you're in Guild Wars 2 and you just right-click a book a bunch of times to boost yourself up to 80, it removes what a level means. We should care more about the journey to get somewhere than we do about the destination. We should care about the game we're playing, not just trying to get to what we fear we're missing out on. This kind of ties directly into what I think the third problem is with gaming, and that's the community around us. People used to play games to hang out with friends or loved ones in the game when they couldn't go directly see them. You would actually build a relationship with the guild mates and the group mates that you hung out with and actually care to log on with the people. Everyone these days is more interested in battle royale modes or arena games because you can jump in and only have an hour or 30 minutes to play and you can accomplish something and play a match. We don't have less time nowadays than we did 10 to 20 years ago. The main difference is 20 years ago, the people who played EverQuest 1 were willing to not accomplish much in the game for 30 minutes to an hour that they had to do between working jobs or going to sleep, taking care of kids. They didn't care that they couldn't accomplish much. They cared that they got to hang out with the people that they wanted to see. And the game was the platform for that. There are multiple reasons this doesn't exist anymore. Everything's about speed runs, like Outriders Expeditions, or power leveling your character, or getting to the end game like we just discussed. EverQuest 1 thrived on camp checks. You would walk into a zone, do a camp check, and people would let you know what location they were in the zone. You would have groups of people sitting at one location, killing this mob that would spawn and take a few minutes to spawn. Instead of looking for the fastest way to get to the end game or the fastest way to kill the enemies, they relished the opportunity to kill a mob and then hang out for a couple minutes and talk to each other in chat, to get to know each other better, to hang out in the game in between doing the combat, and they weren't worried about their efficiency or their effectiveness with experience. I remember playing Darkfall years ago, and the most memorable experience in that game was the first time me and my group built a crappy raft and tried to sail over the ocean on these boards with some barrels tied to them and just laughing the whole time at the ridiculousness of it and the adventure we were on. It wasn't the most effective. We got nothing accomplished on that little raft trip. We did not get any gear. In fact, we lost gear we had. But the adventure and the experience with the people around you was the purpose for playing the game. The community in video games is completely hurt by party finders, matchmaking, and everyone complaining about needing to be able to solo what they're doing and be able to take it by themselves because they don't want to play with anybody else. There are a lot of single-player RPGs out there. There were single-player RPGs back then that people could play. But if you logged onto a multiplayer game, whether it's a looter shooter like Division, Ghost Recon, Outriders, or it's an MMORPG like the three we've been talking about, you are logging onto a multiplayer game and it should require multiple people. Easy content, companions, and things like this have ruined the necessity to get to know the people around you, to group up, to form guilds, and to build a community. If we can get back to slowing our own mindset down, relaxing when we play games, and getting to know and care about the people around us in the game, then we can get back to the golden age of gaming where we care to log on to get to know people as opposed to trying to loot a particular item or hit a certain time or speed run or get to certain content. The fourth problem that I think exists with gaming in these days is worthwhile rewards. I'm going to keep on bringing up Outriders, but I have seen so many issues with that game's expeditions with tier 15 having to hit a certain timer that makes no sense and all the problems that plague it, and then get all the way to the end and accomplish these things only to get no legendaries, no gold items out of it. And if I do, they were way harder to get and no better than me getting it on earlier tiers that were easier to accomplish. Dark Age of Camelot thrived on this idea, with Darkness Falls being an awesome dungeon that had the best gear in it, the best drops, and exclusive rewards in it, but only one realm could own it at a time. It incentivized people doing the world vs. world or the realm vs. realm at that time in order to gain control of the best dungeon. They didn't have a problem telling the other two realms that you're locked out of it because you didn't perform well enough in PvP. They were able to put worthwhile rewards behind something not everyone could accomplish, and they didn't have any problems or people complaining about it not being fair. EverQuest 1 had people sitting for days, hours, however long it took them to get the flowing black silk sash. That 21% haste was such a coveted reward that people would sit for the longest time waiting to get it. And now we have games like Biomutant having class perks of 5% movement speed or 10 armor. Rewards that are not worth getting at all. Things that are not worth unlocking, and it's so everyone can be close to equal. It's so everyone can do the same things. But I would rather have content that's hard to tackle and have worthwhile rewards behind it, even if you need to gather a community to do it. You need to build a foundation with people around you to accomplish it because you cannot do it by yourself. If something is easy for everyone to accomplish or gain in the game, it cannot be powerful. If everyone is special, then no one is. And in order for gaming to become good again, we need to have things that are special, difficult to attain, and mean something when you get them. And this brings me to my fifth and final problem with gaming in this modern age, and that is consequences. Consequences apply to every part of a game. I mentioned EverQuest having corpse runs already, and survival games keep this element in their genre, but it doesn't really exist in any other genre. Consequences when it came to death, like losing your gear, doing corpse runs, losing experience and levels, forced people to play smarter, to slow down in the game, to build a community and friends, and it links to every other problem that we have. If you had a harder game with more consequences, we would group up more, we would be less reckless, we would take it slower and enjoy the journey more. Now, in order for that to work, you would still have to make a good game that the journey was worth doing, but they're all directly connected. There also needs to be consequences when you talk about class dynamic and choices. If you look at a game like Outriders, every class can be somewhat survivable, every class can use guns and be effective with them, and every class can be decently effective with Anomaly. Guild Wars 2 did something similar when they tried to reinvent the MMO genre, and they gave every class their own heal, Every class could take a good hit, deal out damage, and there were no tanks or healers. The problem is, even though you try to take consequences away from class choice and make everybody the same or everybody able to accomplish the same stuff, players will find out who is the best at these things, and you will have classes falling behind. In Guild Wars 2, there are classes that can't deal as much damage as other ones, and they also can't produce the alacrity that they need in order to be in a fractal. Therefore, that class cannot be part of the meta. In Outriders, Devastators were getting kicked out of groups because they were labeled as the tank class, they had less damage output, but every other class was a jack of all trades that had defenses. So what good did the Devastator bring? It dealt less damage, and every other class could survive good enough to make the tank not needed. There's only one game that I know of right now that does not have any balance issues, that every class is needed and viable, and that's Final Fantasy XIV. The only game currently employing a deeply rooted Trinity system, with clear set tanks, healers, and DPS. They have consequences when you pick a class. If I select a DPS, I will not take a good hit. I will not be able to keep myself alive through healing, and I will require groupmates. If I select a healer, I will not kill that mob on my own, maybe ever. I will need other players. There are deep consequences within your class choices, and this creates a better community that needs to work together because you have clear strengths and weaknesses. When you try to give everyone every ability or make everyone jacks of all trades, nobody can master anything. And this goes to combat situations and even out of combat situations. EverQuest, way back in the day, allowing wizards to have the unique ability to teleport people through wizard spires. Druids could teleport through druid circles. Some classes could even escape the entire group back to the entrance of a zone to keep them protected from a wipe, and these were unique skills that everyone didn't get. It just made it more important to know a wizard, to know a druid, and to build that community because every class had its ups and its downs, its pros, its cons, its strengths, and its weaknesses. If we do not have consequences in our choices in the game, in our character creation and customization, and we are all the same, then what is the point of choosing a class at all? Alright guys, there were just some of my thoughts on 5 of the biggest problems I see in modern gaming. Why gaming itself has seemingly taken a decline in quality over the years. What we do as players to cause developers to build games like this, and maybe how we can fix it. Hopefully you guys can join me down in the comments there. Let me know what you think the biggest problems are with modern gaming. And not just as a rant, but what can we do to fix it? What can we adjust to make it different? Hopefully this was informational for you, or at least entertaining. I appreciate you joining me. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.